Welcome in. It is another Sports by the Book NFL preview. I'm Jeff Parles. She's Alex White, live at the South Point studio here at the South Point Hotel and Casino in lovely Las Vegas, Nevada, as always. Alex, today we get the Atlanta Falcons, and boy, you and I have had a lot of fun dealing with this team over the last few years.
I mean, it's easy to, right? You have Drake London, you have Bijan Robinson, you have Kyle Pitts, so a lot of upside offensively. Keep thinking that they're going to take the next step, and every year it's been a little disappointing. It's gone through a lot of coaching changes within the last few years. Kirk Cousins experiment last year, and now we've got a young Michael Penix Jr. who will be taking over at center. So what do we do? Are we trusting the Falcons this year, or are we staying away?
Well, we'll get into it. So let's just start with the quarterback, and we'll parse it into the whole division here. But Michael Penix Jr., who showed some glimpses at the end of last year. Of course, the Cousins, it was a train wreck. The experiment was a train wreck. Whether he wasn't 100% healthy, whether he's completely done, obviously the teams around the league thinks he is done, because they would have absolutely at least traded a late round pick for Cousins. Cousins is still there as the backup to Michael Penix Jr. here in Atlanta. As you see on your screen, Atlanta's projected second on the win totals behind Tampa Bay, who is the correct favorite by all accounts in this division yet again. Falcons win total of 8, plus 140 to make the playoffs, plus 230 to win the division, 25 to 1 to win the NFC, 75 to 1 to lift the Lombardi for the first time in franchise history. And you mentioned as well, Alex, this is year 2 for Raheem Morris. They have a new defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich, who a former Falcon himself, comes down from the Jets after his disastrous interim coach tenure in New York. But look, it kind of feels like the same old song and dance with the Falcons, right? Questions at coach, questions at quarterback, and questions of really the mental toughness of a team that has not shown mental toughness, realistically speaking, in its entire franchise's history, other than maybe a year or two.
Very well said. Now 7 consecutive years missing the playoffs for the Falcons, when clearly you see right there, I mean, it hasn't been the most competitive of divisions now. The Saints, Derek Carr retires, so that is why they have fallen all the way down here. But for the books to just give an 8 juice to the under, I mean, I think that says a lot right there. I personally believe this is Tampa's division. I think they are a pretty big step ahead of the next 3. It's really just a question of, can Atlanta even get 8 wins and stay that much ahead of Carolina and the Saints that have will be led by Tyler Shuck.
So we on a New Orleans preview, we pretty much poo-pooed New Orleans as anything this year. Carolina, you and I were in a little bit of a mixed bag. I'm a little bit higher on the Panthers than you are, because I think I'm a little higher on Bryce Young than maybe I should be. But this whole Atlanta Falcon year, and you know what? It's good. Sometimes you learn about a team quickly, and for the Falcons, that might help us from a betting perspective this year, because week 1, right out of the chute, you get Tampa. And not only do you get the Bucs, you get them at home. You get them in Mercedes-Benz. You got a chance right away to make an impact. Get a win, put Tampa behind the 8 ball. And if you lose this game, well, same old Falcons, right? And Atlanta has a really oddly concocted schedule this year. And I think that might be the first time I've said this year with any teams, because they have an early bye. They also have to go to Germany and then have to play 8 consecutive weeks after going to Germany to play Indianapolis in Germany later this year. And the early bye, by the way, after the bye, they have to play Buffalo and San Francisco back-to-back. So that's a brutal 2-game stretch, with it being a short week going out to San Francisco, no less. I want to like this team. I've wanted to like this team the last few years, Alex. And I want to like Michael Penix Jr. We saw a lot of good things out of Penix down the stretch last year when he was pressed into service because of Cousins' inept play. But I am concerned about just the way this team is coached. I don't mind Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator. I think he's a reasonable play caller. But I don't think Raheem Morris is an NFL head coach. He proved that when he was in Tampa. I thought he proved it plenty of times a year ago. There are too many factors with the Falcons that I do not like, which leads me to believe that they're going to get off to a rocky start yet again, just because, again, week 2, they had pivot games early. Week 1 against Tampa, chance to knock off the division champs. Week 2 against Minnesota. Again, we don't know what the Vikings are necessarily going to be early in the season with essentially a rookie quarterback playing in J.J. McCarthy. And by the way, Minnesota's got to go back-to-back primetime games. They play Chicago week 1 on Monday night and then flip around in a short week against Atlanta. So the opportunity's there to win those first 2 games, but how can we trust them, what we've seen over the last 7 years plus now from Atlanta?
And I am rooting for Michael Penix Jr. I feel like I've doubted him, and he's proved me wrong, a lot of people wrong throughout his career, starting with Washington. But I just don't like that start of the year. Those first 6 games, I have him as a dog, and all but one, maybe a pick'em game in there too. So I really think it's going to be a tough start. As you mentioned, a bye week early, then go all the way to Germany. Just not set up for success. Now, I am happy because, I mean, the last how many years the Falcons have been drafting an offensive weapon, number 1. And they did switch over to defense this year, which I do think can definitely help them. And I think it was necessary and needed going into this year. Looking at last year, they finished 23rd in total defense, 22nd in passing. So that was their biggest weakness. They were 15th against the run, but pretty much just average across the board. Total offense, pretty good, 6th. Passing offense 5th and rushing offense 10th. Now, how much of that was the good Kirk Cousins we saw at the beginning of the year, and then the Michael Penix Jr. we saw at the end, and the injured Kirk Cousins in the middle of that. So high ceiling, also low floor. I don't know. This team is also very hard to figure out. I don't really have anything strong. I think the bookmakers got it right. These middle tier teams, right around the 8s, are usually pretty right.
You know, it's so fascinating with this Atlanta team because their first 2 picks in this NFL draft, again, were pass rushers, Pierce and Walker. And they give up a lot to move back into the first round as well to get Pierce. You know, I'll just say this: Walker's the second favorite, by the way, to win Defensive Player of the Year at 10-1, or Defensive Rookie of the Year, I should say, at 10-1. I don't see it. I really don't. I just don't see him being that short. Now, the Defensive Rookie market is a little bit complex because Abdul Carter, I've talked about. I think he's going to run away and hide with this award, but then there are about 10 to 15 guys who are looked at very similarly in that market. Walker, who's going to beat, look, Atlanta hopes he's their number 1 pass rusher. If he's not, then they got a big problem on their hands because of the way that they're constructed at the current moment. So, yeah, I'd much rather have him than Pierce, but I don't really. I think 10-1's way too short to be betting this preseason here, Alex.
I do too. And it makes it a little tricky. I've checked a few different websites and depth charts, and I don't always see him as a starter. So I do think, well, yeah, he is right there on ESPN. That's the last one I had to check. But that just concerns me because I know that they added a lot of pieces. They have a lot more depth on their defense. It's just whether or not he starts right off the bat.
Offensively speaking, real quick, Alex, of course, we've mentioned the quarterback Penix Jr., but Bijan Robinson, Drake London, we know high-end draft capital used on both of them. London has really become I would say underrated top flight wide receiver at this point. Robinson, we know what the deal is with Bijan at this point. When Bijan gets his touches, Bijan is elite. Bijan, by the way, the 5th favorite in Offensive Player of the Year at 18-1. And then there's Kyle Pitts, who, again, are we going to do this again to in our fantasy leagues where we overdraft Kyle Pitts? Again, Michael Penix Jr. mentioned in the press conference a few days ago that we know he's an elite talent. Got to get him the ball more. But I'm not going to get fooled again. We've gotten fooled now 4 straight years on that. But, you know, it's just so interesting. And this is kind of the conundrum of this Falcon team, isn't it? Where you have a top 5 running back. You have a top 15 wide receiver. You have, in theory, a top 5 tight end who's never proven it. You have an offensive line that's not, I mean, Jake Matthews is a top flight left tackle. You have, to me, Caleb McGarry, who I think can be a top flight right tackle. So you have pieces on this offense. It's just that it's never, ever gone together in one fell swoop. By the way, I didn't even mention Chris Lindstrom, who's mentioned as a 40-1 shot in the Protector of the Year. So this is a team that in theory, should be a high-end offense, but we can't trust that until we actually see it for once with these guys.
Well, you just mentioned all the different awards, and all of them are at the top, pretty short odds. So that should tell you enough right there. Bijan makes me nervous because they do share a lot of the carries with Tyler Algier. So that makes me nervous to bet on anything for him, whether it is regular season rushing yards or offensive player of the year. You didn't even mention, Michael Penix Jr. is pretty loaded because we saw Darnell Mooney and Ray McCloud both have very good years last year too. So between those two and Drake London, this should be an elite offense, to say the least.
Should. That's kind of what it's been with Atlanta, right? Shoulda, woulda, coulda these last few years. Alex, I'm not betting anything preseason with these guys. I can't bring myself to bet that 8. That's the one that intrigues me the most, of betting over 8 at a plus money, because 8 and 9 makes a heck of a lot of sense yet again for these guys, where they kind of mess around. They based off of the way the games go, you're like, how did this team now win 11 games? But they give away games at the end because they're not well coached. That's how I look at this Atlanta team. And I think Penix is capable of having a huge season. At over 4,000 passing yards at plus 250, I think is a reasonable bet for Michael Penix Jr. I think he's live to be the leading passer in the NFL by yards.
Wow.
I think he has an opportunity to do that just because of the way that Atlanta might be having to come back in some of these games as well. But in the end, this has been a untrustworthy organization for a very long time. And especially recently when their head coaching questions have been fully on display, whether it's Arthur Smith before or whether it was last year with Raheem Morris. This is an unbettable team before the season. I want to see what they do week 1 against Tampa, because that is going to tell the tale for what the Atlanta Falcons are for me this year. If they lose week 1 at home to Tampa in a coin flip game, 7-10, 8-9, 6-11 even, in play. You win that game, you send Tampa behind the 8 ball, the vibes are completely different for a team that has not had the best of vibes over the last half decade.
I can't wait to get to our Tampa Bay preview.
You're super high on the Bucs.
Super high on the Buccaneers this year. Just looking at the win totals, we're both. I think you're leaning more to the under of 8, or you don't want to touch it because you.
I'm not touching it. It would actually be, if you're making me take the win total, I would take the over.
You take the over.
I would take the over because I don't. Even though the back end schedule is difficult from week 14 and on, those last 4 games, except for that Saints game, the final week, this is not an overly difficult schedule.
Right.
It really isn't. It's just a matter of execution, which has been the issue for Atlanta now for a while.
Doesn't matter. Over, under, we'll probably end up with a push there with the Falcons.
Likely.
Win total there. But I'm just shocked that Tampa Bay is just sitting right there at 9.5 when kind of looking at the other 3 teams, it's been more, maybe one of the 3 is an over, but seems like 2 are more unders than anything. So we'll see. I'm excited. I think that's a great first game for both of them, and we'll find out a lot about both of them, definitely.
100%. It's fascinating to see how this will all go for one of the more perplexing teams, as always, the Atlanta Falcons here in the NFC South. As you see, the second betting favorite right now behind Tampa, plus 230 to win the division, 25-1 to win the NFC, and then 75-1 to win the Super Bowl, which I don't think either of us think is in the cards this year for Atlanta.
They have the talent, right? If they can actually get.
Let's win 10 games first if you're the Falcons.
Here we go again. See, they already got me.
Yeah, exactly. I just can't quit them. The Atlanta Falcons. All right, that's been our look at the Atlanta Falcons going into the 2025 season. Make sure you're hitting the subscribe button here, of course, South Point Studio and Sports by the Book. Make sure you subscribe to both channels. You and I are live, Alex, every weekday.
That's right, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m.
1 o'clock Eastern time if you're watching us from the state of Georgia. Best in sports betting every single day, but you got to hit that subscribe button to make sure you're aware and make sure you're seeing all 32 NFL previews here this year. She's Alex White. I'm Jeff Parles. We'll see you next time on the 2025 NFL season previews here on Sports by the Book, live as always from the South Point Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas.